The final book I have to talk about is probably, hey, focus, focus, goodness. Oh. Okay, so action. Hey, how's it going? How's life? My name is Sophia. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I am going to be doing my most anticipated releases for 2021. Now, for this list, I don't have a lot of books. I have been going through different websites. I've been through Goodreads trying to find books to add to this list, but I only managed to come up with 7 books, which I guess isn't too bad. I guess it just means less books added to my TBR. But without further ado, let's get into my most anticipated without further ado, let's get into my most anticipated releases for next year. The first book on my list is A Psalm of Storms and Silence by Roseanne A. Brown. This is going to be the second book in the A Song of Wraiths and Ruin series, with the first book being A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. I read this earlier this year for our Chaos Rising book club, and it was so much fun. I really enjoyed every moment. Malik was just a precious cinnamon roll himbo who needs to be protected at all costs, and Karina is just she that bitch. In this story, you are following our 2 main characters, Karina and Malik, who for whatever reason have to kill each other in order to get something that they want. It's a super vague synopsis. I recommend not reading the synopsis because apparently it spoils you for something that happens 100 pages later in the book. My favorite aspect of this book was definitely the culture. It's so interesting seeing West African inspired fantasy where we don't get enough of it. And it was just so unique, so immersive. The characters were so lovable, and I highly recommend it. With the way that the first book ended, and with the way Roseanne A. Brown has been trolling us on Twitter, I am super excited, super hyped to see what comes next. And this comes out on June 1st. The next book I have to talk about is The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. In this story, you are following our main character Decca, who lives in fear of the blood ceremony. And in this ceremony, they basically cut you to see which color your blood runs. If your blood runs red, that means you are pure, and if it runs gold, I guess it means that you are impure. And so on the day of the ceremony, Decca's blood runs gold. And so her only 2 options are to either stay in the village where she will probably be killed, or join the Emperor's army. And our story goes from there. I am super excited for this one, particularly because this is also a West African inspired fantasy, and I am living for all the Black women debuting and writing in the YA fantasy genre. I know growing up it's something that I would have loved and appreciated, and so seeing all these talented, amazing, beautiful women get the recognition that they deserve is super exciting for me. And so as a result, I will be eating up anything written by a Black woman. The Gilded Ones comes out on February 9th. The next book I have to talk about is Nowhere by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd book in the Skyward Quartet. In the first book, you're following our main character Spencer, who wants to one day become a pilot like her father. But unfortunately for her, she can't, because at one point in time her father was deemed a coward, and so she is not even allowed to join the pilot academy. When I read Skyward a couple of years ago, I absolutely loved and enjoyed it. It was one of my first foray. It was one of my first foray into YA sci-fi, and I thought it was fun. I loved everything about Skyward. I loved our main character Spencer and how she was always threatening people. I loved Jordan and how they kept calling him asshat. I think it was asshat, but they kept insulting him and I thought it was funny. I loved the group dynamics. I loved the world building. I loved the space fight scenes. I loved practically everything about it. And then Starsight came out and it was okay. I'm hoping that the second book was just a case of middle book syndrome and that the third book expands on the world, and just I'm hoping that the third book is a hell of a lot better than the second one, basically. And for the most part, from what I've read of Brandon Sanderson, I trust him kinda, but we will see when this comes out. This one does not have a specific release date. When I checked on Goodreads, it just said 2021. The next book also doesn't have a release date. If I'm being completely honest, it's not even on Goodreads. It's not on any website. And that is going to be Monstrous Volume 6 by Sana Takeda and Mashori Lee. I'm assuming it's going to come out in 2021 because every year a volume has come out, so I'm hoping. In the first book, you are following our main character Micah Halfwolf, who has a monster living inside of her, and we're basically following her perspective as she figures out why she has a demon living inside of her. And there's also a war between humans and Arcanics, which are these magical beings, and we get to see the horrors of war through this series. And I love everything about this series. I love the plot, I love the characters, I love the art style. In general, I tend to struggle with graphic novels, and so Monstrous is just, it's just my little baby and I love it so much. Super excited, super hyped for this one to come out. The next book I have to talk about is the Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I don't know much about this book. If I'm being completely honest, actually, I don't know anything about this book except that it is inspired by Indian history and mythology, and it is sapphic. Tasha Suri wrote Empire of Sand, which I read earlier this year, and the slow burnness, that romance was just slow burn, and I loved it so much. Oh my gosh. And I'm hoping that the romance in the Jasmine Throne is just as good, just as slow burn as the one in Empire of Sand. Plus, I don't read enough sapphic books or sapphic romances, so I'm super excited for this one as well. This one comes out on June 10th. Pick it up. The next book I have to talk about is The House of Always by Jen Lyons. Now, if you've seen any of my videos, you know that I absolutely loved Ruin of Kings. It's one of my favorite books I've read of 2020. Spoiler alert. In this story, you are following our main character Kieran, who is locked up in prison, and he's basically telling the story of how he got there. It sounds like a basic premise, but the execution is so much more, and the plot has so much more to it. But just go in blind. Trust me and go into this blind. But what's really dope about this story is not only is Kieran telling his story, but you're also getting his story from the perspective of other people, and that execution was just mwah. Something I have never seen before. It was very unique and I loved every second of it. If I were to describe this book in one term, it would be a complete mindfuck, because the twists and turns that this story takes is just so freaking good. My mind was literally blown every other page. That's how good it was. And then I read that one book that shall not be named, and I was just like, ugh. One of my most disappointing reads of this year as well. But I am currently reading Memory of Souls, and so far I do like that a lot better than that other book that I refuse to name. And so I am hoping that The House of Always is just as good, just as mind-fucking as the first one, basically. House of Always comes out on May 11th. So the final book I have to talk about is probably, out of all of these books, is the most anticipated release for 2020. And that is going to be Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. Oh! If you haven't read Jade City and Jade War, what are you doing with your life? Because that book is just... In the first book, you are following the Call family, which is like a gang crime lord family. You wasn't ready for that. And you're following them as they're dealing in bioenergetic jade, as well as they beef with the Mountain Clan. And in the second book, the world, the politics get expanded to a whole new level, and the stakes are raised. I know that this one will crush my spirit, crush my soul, and so I'm super excited, super hyped for that one. But yeah, those are my most anticipated releases for 2021. Feel free to comment down below. Let me know some of your most anticipated release is. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope to see you guys soon with another video, and until then, I will see you soon. Bye!